The first war between the Vala and Melkor began before Arda was fully shaped, and Melkor had the upper hand. But Tulkas came in the midst of the war, and Melkor fled before his wrath and his laughter, and forsook Arda, and there was peace for a long age. Then the Vala brought order to the world, and Yavanna planted the seeds she had long devised, and Ale, at the prayer of Yavanna, wrought two mighty lamps for the lighting of the Middle Earth. Then Varda filled the lamps, and Manwë hollowed them. The Vala set them upon high pillars. One lamp they raised near to the north of Middle Earth. It was named Illuin, and the other was raised in the south, and it was named Ormal. And the light of the lamps of the Vala flowed out over all the earth. And there arose a multitude of growing things, great and small, but nowhere more rich than in the midmost parts of the earth, where the light of both the lamps met and blended. And there upon the isle of Almaren, in the great lake, was the first dwelling of the Vala. Then Manwë ordained a great feast, and the Vala and all their host came at his bidding. And Melkor knew of all that was done, for even then he had secret friends and spies among the Maiar, whom he had converted to his cause. And far off in the darkness he was filled with hatred, being jealous of the work of his peers, whom he desired to make subject to himself. Therefore he gathered to himself spirits out of the halls of Ea, that he had perverted to his service, and he deemed himself strong. Now Melkor began the delving and building of a vast fortress, deep under earth, beneath dark mountains where the beams of Illuin were cold and dim. That stronghold was named Utumno, and though the Vala knew naught of it as yet, none the less the evil of Melkor and the blight of his hatred flowed out thence, and the spring of Arda was marred. But Melkor, trusting in the strength of Utumno and the might of his servants, came forth suddenly to war, and struck the first blow, ere the Valar were prepared. And he assailed the lights of Illuin and Orma, cast down their pillars, and broke their lamps. In the overthrow of the mighty pillars lands were broken, and seas arose in tumult, and when the lamps were spilled, destroying flame was poured out over all the earth, and the shape of Arda and the symmetry of its waters and its lands were marred, and the first designs of the Vala were never after restored. In the confusion and darkness Melkor escaped, and he came to Utumno ere Tulkas could overtake him, and there he lay hid. And the Valar could not at that time overcome him, for the greater part of their strength was needed to restrain the tumults of the earth, and to save from ruin all that could be saved of their labor. And afterwards they feared to rend the earth again, until they knew where the children of Iluvatar were dwelling, who were yet to come in a time that was hidden from the Vala. Thus ended the spring of Arda. The dwelling of the Vala upon Almaren was utterly destroyed. They had no abiding place upon the face of the earth. Therefore they departed from Middle-earth and went to the land of Aman, the westernmost of all lands upon the borders of the world. And the Vala fortified their dwelling, and upon the shores of the sea they raised the Pelori, the mountains of Aman, highest upon earth. And above all the mountains of the Pelori was that height upon which summit Manwë set his throne. Tani Cretil, the elves named that mountain. From their halls upon Tani Cretil, Manwë and Varda could look out across the earth even into the furthest east. Behind the walls of the Pelori, the Valar established their domain in that region which is called Valinor, and there was their houses, their gardens, and their towers. In that guarded land the Valar gathered great store of light, and all the fairest things that were saved from the ruin. Many others yet fairer they made anew, and Valinor became more beautiful even than Middle-earth in the spring of Arda, and it was blessed. For the deathless dwelt there, and they are not faded nor withered. Neither was there any strain upon flower or leaf in that land, nor any corruption of sickness in anything that lived. for the very stones and waters were hallowed. And when Valinor was full wrought, and the mansions of the Valar were established, in the midst of the plain beyond the mountains they built their city, Valmar. Beyond its western gates there was a green mound, and Yavanna hallowed it. And she sat there long upon the green grass and sang a song of power. But Nienna thought in silence, and watered the mound with tears. In that time the Valar were gathered together to hear the song of Yavanna, and they sat silent upon their thrones of council in the Ring of Doom. And as they watched, upon the mound there came forth two slender shoots. And under the song of Yavanna, the saplings grew and became fair and tall, and came to flower. And thus there awoke in the world the two trees of Valinor. Of all things which Yavanna made, they have most renown, and about their fate all the tales of the elder days are woven. The one had leaves of dark green, that beneath were a shining silver, and from each of his countless flowers a dew of silver light was ever falling, and the earth beneath was dapped with the shadows of his fluttering leaves. The other bore leaves of a young green, like the new opened beech. Their edges were of glistening gold. Flowers swung upon her branches in clusters of yellow flame, formed each to a glowing horn that spilled a golden rain upon the ground. And from the blossom of that tree there came forth warmth and a great light. Telperion, the one was called in Valinor, but Laurelin the other was, and many names in song beside. In 7 hours the glory of each tree waxed to full, and waned again to naught, and each awoke once more to life an hour before the other ceased to shine. Thus in Valinor thrice every day there came a gentle hour of softer light. Both trees were faint, their gold and silver beams were mingled. Telperion was the elder of the trees, and came first to full stature and to bloom. In that first hour in which he shone, the Valar reckoned not into the tale of hours, but named it the opening hour, and counted from it the ages of their reign in Valinor. Now as the ages drew on to the hour appointed by Iluvatar for the coming of the firstborn, Middle-earth lay in a twilight under the stars, and Melkor walked abroad in many shapes of darkness and fear. Yet the Valar would not make war upon him, knowing the damage that such a war would bring, and not knowing where the firstborn would appear. Now the children of Iluvatar are elves and men, and they were conceived by him alone. For this reason, the Valar are to these kindreds rather their elders and chieftains, instead of their masters. And they've had more dealings with the elves, who are most like them. But to men, Iluvatar gave strange gifts. Now elves are bound to the earth, and they live so long as it lives, and they die not, save by grief or by wound, and to both these they are subject to. And dying they are gathered to the halls of Mandos, there to await, and in time they may come back among the living in Valinor. But men exist only for a short space within the world, and dying they depart to where even the Valar do not know. And so death is the gift of Iluvatar, which some day even the powers may envy. But Melkor has cast his shadow about it, and brought evil out of good, and fear out of hope.